You ever wonder what your personality says about you and how you interact with your environment? Well, join me, Marissa, each week as we dive deep into the Enneagrams and its 9 different personality types. So, let's get personal. Hello! I'm Marissa, and welcome to Let's Get Personal, where we just talk about the 9 different Enneagram types. Yeah, the 9 different Enneagram types each week. So this week we're going to talk about type 5s. Type 5 is very personal to me because my best friend, she's also my roommate, she's a type 5. So I currently live with someone who's a type 5, so I know a lot of the traits, and I understand them a little bit more than the other traits, the other types that I know, other types there. So for Enneagram type 5, their biggest, the title is mostly, they go by the investigator, but there's a lot of other names, like the observer, the analyst, a thinker, the philosopher, the sage, and also like the inclusive. Those are some names for the type 5. Type 5s are very alert, and they're insightful and they're curious. They're also very independent and innovative. Type 5s, the big thing about a type 5 is the type 5s think about everything before they do it. If you talk to a type 5 and you ask them a question, they're going to go and think about it. They're going to think of every possible situation. Also, before they do anything. Before a type 5 does anything that's even remotely like impactful or going to impact, they're going to think about every possible outcome. They don't just blurt stuff out. Like, that does not happen with the type 5s. They always think it through and then go, oh, if I go take this route or if I do this route, they always have like many different possibilities and options, courses of action of how something they could do. Type 5s also know a lot about random stuff. They're the kind of people who would be like, oh yeah, I wonder why like the sky's blue. And they'll know all these random stuff because they're very curious about the world around them and they like to know the reasons. They like to know the reasons for everything. Like a type 1 likes to know that, type 1 also like they know the reason for everything, but they like to do it in a way where they're just curious. Their basic fear for a type 5 is being useless, helpless, or incapable. They don't like being incapable or anything. And their basic desire is to be capable and competent. Their key motivations for type 5s, they want to possess knowledge, to understand the environment, to have everything figured out as a way of defending themselves from threats from the environment. So they don't want anything to go, like they want to have this, like it's like a backup plan. It's a, type 5s are the kind of the people who you categorize in the terms of anxiety. A lot of type 5s have anxiety because it's just something that it's itchy, sorry. They've, something that's happened in their characteristics in the way that they're very anxious about stuff. And they're like, well, if I do this, what will happen that way, or that kind of situation. And they want to find out why things are. They're very smart. They're very like detective-y people. And the ones who are going to, when they dive into something, they're going to learn it all. They are very they can hyper-focus on stuff a lot of the times because they want to know the answers and not in a way of like, I need to know the answers, like I want to know the answers. They really want to understand how the world works. Very important to them. And type 5s are usually introverts. They are mostly introverts. There are a few extrovert type 5s, but that's not a normal thing for type 5s. Type 5s also like their space. A type 5 would rather stay away and learn by themselves than to have other people teach them or have other people help them. Fun little facts about type 5s is that their workspaces are typically minimalist. but with the exception of a collection of items pertaining to their core interests. Type 5s will learn stuff, but Type 5s really have their core interests. There's things that they really, really enjoy, and then they know everything about this, like hobby or interest or group. Or my friend, she's like the band. She knows all this stuff about these bands, and they have their things that they're really into, and they know it all, and that's what they really like. They like to have all this knowledge that they hold, because they just don't want, they want to be able to explain it. In the Type 5, like the workspaces, I can very much vouch for my friend. She is her workspace is very minimalist, but she's a very plant person. She really likes plants. So you go into her room, and her desk, there's like not less, but like on the windowsill, there's like 10 different plants, which is not very minimalist when you have so many plants, because a Type 5 will find their one thing that they're really into and then take that. So say a Type 5 is really into snow globes. They collect snow globes. They'll have like nothing else, but they'll have collections of snow globes. They'll have collections of stuff. They're usually nonconformist. They like to seek knowledge. That's the biggest thing about Type 5, is they seek knowledge, and all these logical explanations for how something is. There are some unhealthy traits of a Type 5 that happen, is that they can end up detaching themselves. They detach themselves from emotions in others. A Type 5, if something's going wrong in a Type 5's life, or if there's something happening, they go into their shell. Sometimes they go into their home, or as someone said, a cave. Sometimes their cave is like their actual home, or sometimes it's just in their brains, like in their minds, and they'll kind of get lost in that. And that's a very unhealthy situation where they can tend to take themselves out from the rest of the world and go into this bubble where they don't need anybody else. And nobody else is needed. They can do this all by themselves kind of situations. Yes, Type 5s are self-sufficient. They like to believe that they're totally self-sufficient, not in a way that they have to be self-sufficient and that nobody can help them. They just like to think that they're self-sufficient, and they don't like to rely on people. Very very non-confrontational people. They don't want to rely on others to help them. So it can happen in a way where a Type 5 will not know how to do something, but they would rather figure it out on their own and go Google it. Yeah, so they would rather go figure it out on their own than to ask for help. They would rather go online, and it's not in a non-confrontational way. It's like oh no, I want to know how this works. I don't really want someone else to teach me. Let me learn it myself. They're the kind of people who something would break, and then instead of calling somebody to fix it, they would fix it themselves because they want to know how to fix it. Even if it's just other random things that aren't necessary, like a broken watch, they will be like, oh, I'm going to fix this. They could be hypersensitive. So Type 5s they're in touch with their emotions. They're very good at understanding their emotions. They're very perceptive. So because Type 5s have understand everything in the world and something they're into, they understand it, they're very perceptive. So they can pick up with other people's, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes they detach themselves when they feel threatened, or if they feel scared or nervous. They'll detach themselves from their own emotions, and then they won't be able to express themselves in a way that's not just like a blank slate. They're deep thinkers. They tend to overthink. Overthinkers. Type 5s, huge overthinkers. They overthink anything. The biggest situation is my friend, all of my friends group, and we all talk to each other all the time, you know, and she ends up not talking as much. Not in the way that she doesn't want to talk. She will sit in a situation and we'll have a conversation, and then in her brain she'll be like, okay, I can respond like this, or I can respond like this, or I can respond like this. And my friend group, we're a very fast-paced moving group. Like, we have one conversation, like one topic, and then we'll just keep switching. And so by the time she finally has come to the conclusion of what exactly, like what sentence or how she's going to respond to this, we're on a different topic. And she was thinking that whole time about, how can I fix this? Like, what am I going to say? Not how can I fix this. She's like, what am I going to say this time? And so type 5s tend to they're not the most sociable, not because they don't want to be sociable, because they are very much thinking about what they want to say. They don't just say anything haphazardly. So type 5s can be large procrastinators. Not in a way that like they're procrastinating and not doing the work. They're doing the work, but they're just trying to find every single possible way that they can do it. So in the eyes of all the other types, they are procrastinating. They're not getting the work done. But in reality, they're like, okay, I can do it this way, and I can do it this way, and I can also do it this way. So they have too much knowledge that they're trying to cram into like a project. It just takes them a lot longer. Knowledge is very important to them, as I've said. It's their biggest key factor is knowledge. It's how they defend themselves from the outside world when they feel like they're being attacked. If somebody were to say something they would hate you with, I'd be like, oh no, but this is this, because they don't want I think they're a feeling group. I don't have to remember, but they lead off of fear. They're a fear group. They lead off of fear. And yeah, because when they get scared, they go like a hermit crab. They go into their shells. Strong independent thinkers, they're really clever, and they're very perceptive. They have clear objective minds. They will go for it and they will achieve something. They also make very good managers because they overthink anything, and anything in some type of big leadership position, type 5s do very well in leadership positions because they're not going into something without having every possible outcome thought of. And so if somebody were like, say they went to a meeting and somebody were to come with a counter argument, they would have a counter argument for the counter argument because they already thought of this. Very good management positions. They make very informed decisions. They do the research about stuff. They will know all these random things that other people wouldn't even think that was needed to know at all. They would be like, oh, this is needed. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess it's needed. And then they'll go off with all that. They work through things before coming to a conclusion. They can be very persistent and strong-willed, very persistent on what they need. Because they're like, oh, I did my research. I know all this. I know every outcome. This is what we want to do. They're also not the type to give you a quick answer. If you were to ask them, it doesn't matter, if you were to ask a type 5 any question, it doesn't matter what it is, and you would give them their option, it will take them a long time to answer. Even yesterday, we were trying to figure somewhere because me and my friend, we were just on the road. We were going on a quick run to Target, but you know when you go to Target, it's never quick. You end up going to like every other place in the store. So we were like, okay, let's just go pick up food somewhere because we don't want to make food. It was like 9 o'clock at night. So I remember talking about my friends, like, where do you want to go? And it was very much like she had to sit there and think about it. And it's not bad. You would find a good option, but the fact of it's that stress when somebody were to be like, okay, I need this done. I need you to answer this question really quick. Type 5s panic. They get really stressed. They are not the people you should ever go to if you need a quick answer or a quick decision. They will stress, and that will feed their anxiety. They also don't like to be told things so that they know. So if they are like a plant person, and they know everything about plants. They don't want you to tell them about plants because they're like, that's not my thing, but like that's me. They also, not saying they like to be gatekeepers of knowledge sometimes, but sometimes they like to be gatekeepers of knowledge, or have things. They like to have things that's theirs. Type 5s are the kind of people who need their own personal space. They give off those vibes, and sometimes you'll understand, like, you need to leave them alone for a couple hours. Like, they don't need to be with everyone 24/7. They need their own time. Very much. Type 5. They want to be their own space. They are, categoristically, they're the little kind of nerdier kind of people, the ones who read the books and the ones who have the small group of friends. And there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. That's just like characteristically what they kind of go more towards, like the people who really get lost in books and get lost in knowledge, and history nerds. There are definitely a lot of history nerds who are type 5s, because then they go in and they learn it all. They don't welcome intrusions in their life, in their space. They don't welcome intrusions in their space. So type 5s have their space. It's their space. They like it to be theirs, and they want to have little things that's theirs. And if you're gonna would barge in onto type 5, they don't appreciate that. They like to be warned, or they like to know what's happening, and they like to know what's happening. Type 5s like to know what's happening, because if they don't know what's happening, how will they plan? How would they observe? How would they investigate? How would they know what can happen if they don't know what's happening? Surprises, not the best for type 5s. I wouldn't say they're the best for type 5s. They, as I said, tend to withdraw if you put too much on them. If you're intruding on their life too much, they'll withdraw into it, and sometimes they'll become like little hermit crabs, and they won't talk to anybody or anything because they're like, oh, anxiety. The man can make them tired and then also stressed. In the fact of demands, emotional demand is really bad on a type 5. So if you're asking them a question, or where do you want to eat? They could answer it, but it would be stressful. But if you're going to ask them how they feel about something, or do you like this person? Anxiety up the roof, unless they're really close. Type 5s, you don't know that much about. Type 5s are the kind of people who keep a lot secret until you get to know them. Not because they're afraid to open up, just because that they don't open up, and they don't know how you would feel, or they're kind of very secretive people. They have their likes, and they'll talk to you about it, but they're not going to tell everybody everything about themselves because it's their thing. It's them. It's their thing. They don't need everyone to know it, which is respectful, understandable. They're fairly reserved. The best way to talk with type 5s is just to engage them. And if you're in a work setting or friend group, go to them with questions. Don't wait for them to come to you, because they never will. Type 5s will not come to you really and ask you questions. So if you have a question, you gotta go to type 5 and ask them, because then engage them with something they like. If you want to make type 5 friends, find them and be like, hey, I saw that you have this shirt from this band. I like that band. And then they can talk about it, and it gives them some familiarity and something that blends well with you, that you have similarities, and so they don't feel like they're not the only one, but they're different. They pop quizzes are bad, and most of the time they are more virtual people than they are face to face. So they'd rather send you an email than to call you up on the phone or to confrontation you in person. they're not those people. They don't really enjoy that. So type, okay, sorry. The biggest situation about type 5s is, we'll talk about some people who are type 5s. I had this conversation with my friend, and I didn't really get a lot of information. I didn't really dive deep into this, but we were trying to figure out who, because I've been, every week I've been correlating this to a Marvel character, and Bruce Banner's a type 5. So a lot of people say that Vision's a type 5. But I don't believe Vision's a type 5 necessarily. And again, he's like 2 years old, so it's kind of hard to notice it, But Bruce Banner's type 5, but not the Hulk. Different. Bruce Banner's a type 5 in the way where he kind of went into a very unhealthy state, where he became a hermit. Type 5s, they'll put themselves out, and then he put himself away and was like, nobody, alone. And that's a very type 5, because when they get into the unhealthy, they don't like to talk to anybody, and they don't like to open up, and they don't want to have any contact with people. And that's a very Bruce Banner thing, where he went into seclusion. I'm not really sure other reasons. Did not look into this, because all the websites are like, he's not a 5. And I was like, no, me and my friend talked, and we're like, no, we're pretty sure he's a type 5. We're pretty sure. Other people who are type 5s are like Bill Gates is a type 5. Tim Burton, Jane Goodall, Snape, and Dumbledore are both type 5s. Yeah. In the best way, they're in a group. They're the people that you don't know the most about at the beginning. So if you were to make a friend group, the people who it would take a long time for you to actually even know who they are, that's a type 5. They don't open up. And the other groups, like type 9 takes a long time to open up also, but type 9s will change their personalities to not fit in, but mesh, so that you get to know them, but you don't get to know the real them. Type 5s won't even tell you. They'll just kind of stay quiet, and they'll be more of the observers in the group. They won't be the leaders in conversation, and they don't really start conversations, and they don't really plan stuff. They just like to follow along and go with what everyone else is doing. Let's see what else I have here. I was trying to talk, and I was trying to figure out what people's if they were in a story, or I was trying to say what's their story character situation, because we talked about, I don't remember who it was, I think it was 4-3, how they're the wallflowers, and I was like, okay, so what is a type 5? And my friend could not figure it out, and I could not figure it out either, but I was like, okay, all we figured out was that they're not the main characters. Type 5s are not, as you would put in a movie or a TV show, the main, or books. And they're not the main characters. They're more like a side character who's there, who's following along. So not not necessarily even the best friend, the other friend in the friend group of, there's the friend group, but then there's the best friends that the movie's based off of, or there's the one girl that the movie's based off of, and then her best friend's in the lot, but then they also have their other friends that they see. That's a type 5. There are those other people who are there who are just kind of observing in the background and seeing it all, but not interfering. And interfere, there's a flag. Interfering or making themselves a prominent part. They also have deep insecurities. Because the type 5s tend to understand the world, but they're very insecure about themselves. And they want to compromise that with knowledge and understanding how everything is working in the world. Let's see. Yes, so they also like to compartmentalize a lot of stuff in their lives. They like to keep stuff separate. So things like college friends or like home friends or like childhood friends, they're going to keep them separate and they don't want them to mesh because they like having these little separate groups that they can go to and not change, but not everything is one thing. They like stability and having that stable thing in their lives. They're not really good in high emotion situations. And yeah, they don't like when things are thrown at them. They can go back into their brains and just kind of get lost, and that's very unhealthy. I was trying to think of what else I watched. Type 5s will know. They will know random things. They will be the ones people who will be like, oh, I know how a dishwasher works. And they're like, why? How do you know that? They're like, I know, because one day I was really curious and Googled it. Or how very observant people. They're very observant. So, yet again, they're not always the best with emotions, but they're very observant. So they can know what's going on. They might not be able to correlate it in the best way or be like, oh, like I see that they're upset, but like I'm not necessarily sure why they're upset or like who they're upset with. Or they can say like, I know something's up, but I'm not necessarily sure if they're upset. That's a big trait for 5s is they like to be observant. I'm trying to think what else I thought of. Yeah. I think that's really all I got for type 5s. Yeah, so that's a type 5. They're just like a recap. They're observers. They overthink. They overthink a lot. They like to, make sure they have a plan for everything, and if anything goes wrong, they got a plan, backup plan. And they can tend to retreat back into their minds and into self-isolation if it's unhealthy. But yeah, so thank you for watching. Join us next week. We're going to talk about type 6, which is interesting because I know only one person who's a type 6. So yeah, thank you. You ever wonder what your personality says about you and how you interact with your environment? Well, join me, Marissa, each week as we dive deep into the Enneagrams and its 9 different personality types. So, let's get personal.